Have you ever experienced that heart-stopping moment when someone you thought you knew suddenly reveals an entirely different side of themselves? That's exactly what happened to me last month at Meridian Publishing, where I've been working as a junior editor for the past year and a half. Our office is one of those modern spaces with glass partitions, sleek desks, and just enough personality to make it feel less corporate. Plants in corners, art on walls, and the constant hum of creativity that comes with a publishing house. But no amount of aesthetic warmth could have prepared me for the heat that would ignite between me and Alex, my straight coworker from the marketing department. Let me paint a picture of Alex for you. Tall, with the kind of confidence that enters a room before he does. Always dressed in crisp button-downs with the sleeves rolled up just enough to show his forearms. He has this habit of running his hand through his dark hair when he's thinking, and a smile that crinkles the corners of his eyes in a way that makes everyone feel like they're in on some private joke. We've been friendly since I started, the kind of workplace relationship built on coffee runs, lunch breaks spent discussing books neither of us had time to finish, and the occasional after-work drink with the team. I should mention that I've been out at work since day one, not in a rainbow flag on my desk kind of way, but I've never hidden who I am. My sexuality is just another part of me, like my love for obscure poetry or my inability to function before my second cup of coffee. Alex knew this, of course. Everyone did. And that's what made what happened all the more surprising. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where the office slowly empties as people drift away to their lives beyond work. I was staying late to finish editing a manuscript that had been giving me headaches all week. The fluorescent lights had dimmed to their evening setting, casting the office in a softer glow that somehow made the work feel less demanding. I was so absorbed in my task that I didn't notice Alex approaching until he was leaning against my desk, his cologne, something woodsy and subtle, announcing his presence before his words did. "Still battling with the Henderson manuscript?" he asked, his voice carrying that end-of-day roughness that somehow made it more appealing. I looked up, blinking away the focus I'd been maintaining on my screen. "Yeah. It's either going to be brilliant or completely incomprehensible. I'm still deciding which." He laughed, and I noticed he'd changed from his usual office attire into a dark blue Henley that made his eyes look even more intense. "I'm heading out to grab a drink with some friends at the Anchor. Want to join when you're done?" The invitation wasn't unusual. We'd gone out in groups before, but something about the way he asked, a slight hesitation in his voice, made me pause. "I should probably finish this tonight." "Rain check." Alex nodded, pushing himself off my desk. "Sure thing. How much longer do you think you'll be?" "Another hour, maybe less if the literary gods are kind," I replied, already feeling my attention being pulled back to the manuscript. "I'll walk you out when you're done," he offered, so casually that I almost didn't register the unusualness of it. Alex's apartment was in the opposite direction of mine. There was no logical reason for him to wait around. "You don't have to do that," I said, confused but admittedly intrigued. "Won't your friends be waiting?" He shrugged, that effortless movement that somehow communicated both nonchalance and purpose. I told them I might be late. "Besides, it's getting dark earlier these days. Let me be a gentleman." There was something in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify, that made my heart rate pick up slightly. But I dismissed it as my imagination, as the product of too many hours staring at romantic prose. "All right, knight in shining armor. I'll text you when I'm wrapping up." He smiled, that smile that always seemed to hold more than it revealed, and walked back to his desk. I tried to refocus on my work, but my mind kept drifting to the thought of Alex waiting for me, of us walking together through the quiet evening streets. It was a distraction I hadn't anticipated and didn't entirely understand. True to my word, I texted him when I was saving my final edits. He responded immediately, "Meet you by the elevators." Something about those 5 simple words sent a flutter through my stomach that I attributed to hunger. After all, I'd worked through dinner. When I approached the elevators, Alex was leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, and that smile appeared again. "Manuscript conquered?" "For now," I said, adjusting my messenger bag on my shoulder. "Until my boss finds 17 more things wrong with it tomorrow." The elevator ride down was filled with the kind of comfortable conversation we'd always shared, office gossip, a new restaurant he'd tried, a book I'd recommended that he'd finally started reading. But there was an undercurrent to it all, a tension that hadn't been there before. I caught him looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, his eyes lingering a beat too long. We stepped out into the night, the city alive with lights and the distant sounds of traffic. The air had that crisp autumn feel that makes you walk closer to whoever you're with, seeking warmth in proximity. Alex gestured toward the side street that would lead to the subway station. "This way?" he asked, though he knew perfectly well which way I usually went. I nodded, and we fell into step beside each other. The conversation continued, but I was increasingly aware of how our shoulders would occasionally brush, how he seemed to be walking closer to me than was strictly necessary. When we reached the less populated corridor that served as a shortcut to the station, the streetlights cast long shadows that danced around us. It happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it. One moment we were walking side by side, discussing the merits of a new coffee shop that had opened near the office, and the next, Alex had gently guided me against the wall of the hallway. His hand was on my arm, not forceful but deliberate, and he was standing close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Alex," I managed to say, my voice betraying my confusion and the sudden acceleration of my heartbeat. He was looking at me with an intensity I'd never seen before, his eyes searching mine for something, permission, perhaps, or understanding. "I've been wanting to do this for weeks," he said, his voice low and slightly unsteady. "Tell me if I'm reading this all wrong." Before I could ask what this was, though I had begun to suspect, he leaned in closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back for too long. "And I know what you must be thinking, that I'm straight, that this is coming out of nowhere. But it's not. It's been building for months." My mind was racing, trying to reconcile the Alex I thought I knew with the man standing before me, vulnerability etched across his features. I never thought you were interested in men," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a nervous gesture that was so unlike his usual confidence. "Neither did I, until you. I've never felt this way about a man before. It's been confusing, terrifying, actually." The revelation hung between us, heavy with implications. Here was Alex, who had dated women exclusively as far as anyone knew, who had never given any indication that he might be questioning his sexuality, admitting to feelings for me that had apparently been developing for months without my knowledge. "Why now?" I asked, genuinely curious about what had prompted this sudden confession. He took a deep breath, his hand still resting on my arm, thumb moving in a small, unconscious circle. "I saw you today, completely absorbed in your work, and I couldn't keep pretending that I only want to be your friend. Life's too short, you know? And I've been driving myself crazy wondering if you might feel something too." The honesty in his voice was disarming. I had always found Alex attractive. Who wouldn't? But I had filed those thoughts away under impossible and workplace inappropriate. Now, with him standing so close, those thoughts came rushing back with an intensity that was hard to ignore. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, which wasn't entirely true. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, questions I wanted to ask, but they were all competing for attention in my mind. "You don't have to say anything," Alex replied, his voice gentle. "But if you want me to step back, to pretend this never happened, just tell me. I value our friendship too much to ruin it if these feelings aren't mutual." There was a vulnerability in his admission that touched something deep within me. Here was someone taking an enormous risk, laying his heart bare in a dimly lit hallway, with no guarantee of how I would respond. The courage that must have taken was not lost on me. "I don't want you to step back," I said finally, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "But I need to understand what this means. For you, for us, for work." He nodded, relief visibly washing over him. "I know it's complicated. I've been thinking about all of that too. But right now, all I know is that I want to kiss you. I have for a long time." The words hung in the air between us, charged with anticipation. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I had imagined scenarios like this in idle daydreams, but never with any expectation that they might come true. And yet here we were, standing in a hallway, the world narrowed down to just the two of us and the electric current that seemed to be pulling us together. "Then why don't you?" I challenged, finding a confidence I didn't know I possessed. That was all the invitation Alex needed. He closed the small distance between us, one hand moving to cup my face while the other remained on my arm, anchoring me to the moment. When our lips met, it was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a statement. But as I responded, leaning into the kiss, it deepened into something more certain, more urgent. Time seemed to suspend itself as we stood there, exploring this new dimension of our relationship. His lips were soft but insistent, his body warm against mine in the cool evening air. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, I saw a mix of wonder and desire in his eyes that mirrored what I was feeling. That was, he began, then shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. Yeah, I agreed, understanding completely what he couldn't articulate. We stood there for a moment, foreheads nearly touching, the reality of what had just happened slowly settling around us. The world hadn't stopped. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked, and the ambient sounds of the city continued, but something fundamental had shifted between us. So what happens now? I asked, voicing the question that was inevitably on both our minds. Alex took a small step back, though his hand remained on my arm, as if he wasn't quite ready to break the physical connection between us. Honestly, I don't know. This is all new territory for me, but I'd like to figure it out. Together, if you're willing. There were 1,000 reasons to be cautious. Workplace complications, the uncertainty of Alex's sexuality, the potential for heartbreak. But in that moment, none of them seemed as important as the man standing in front of me, offering something I hadn't known I wanted until it was presented to me. I'd like that too, I said, and the smile that spread across his face was worth whatever uncertainty lay ahead. We eventually continued our walk to the subway station, though everything felt different now. Our conversation had taken on a new dimension, filled with questions about when feelings had started, what moments had stood out, how we had each hidden our attraction. By the time we reached the station, I felt like I was seeing Alex and our entire history in a completely new light. "Can I take you to dinner tomorrow night?" he asked as we stood at the entrance to the station. A proper date, not just colleagues grabbing food. The word date sent a thrill through me that I couldn't suppress. "I'd like that." He smiled, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me again, right there in public. Instead, he squeezed my hand briefly. "I'll text you details tomorrow. Good night." As I watched him walk away, I tried to process everything that had happened. My straight coworker, who perhaps wasn't as straight as everyone had assumed, had confessed feelings for me, kissed me against a wall, and asked me on a date. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet define, but that held possibilities I was eager to explore. The next day at work was a study in maintaining professionalism while being acutely aware of every glance, every smile, every moment Alex was in the same room. We had agreed via text to keep things discreet at work, at least until we had figured out what this was, but that didn't make it any easier to act normally when all I could think about was the feeling of his lips on mine. Our date that night was at a small Italian restaurant several blocks from the office, far enough that we were unlikely to run into colleagues. Sitting across from him at a candlelit table, watching him nervously adjust his napkin and stumble slightly over the wine list, I saw a side of Alex I hadn't witnessed before. The confident marketing executive was still there, but now I was also seeing the man who was navigating unfamiliar emotional terrain, who was taking a risk on someone new. "I should probably tell you," he said after we'd ordered, his fingers fidgeting with the stem of his wine glass, "that I've never actually been on a date with a man before. So if I'm doing this all wrong, you'll have to let me know." The admission was endearing in its honesty. "There's no wrong way to do this," I assured him. "We're just two people getting to know each other better. The rest is just details." He smiled, visibly relaxing. "That's a good way to look at it. Though I have to say, the details are pretty significant in this case." We talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it always had between us, but with a new layer of openness. He told me about his past relationships with women, how they had always felt right, but somehow incomplete in ways he couldn't articulate. He spoke about the moment he realized his feelings for me went beyond friendship, during a company retreat 3 months earlier, when we'd stayed up late talking by the hotel bar long after everyone else had gone to bed. "You were talking about this book you loved, and you were so passionate about it," he recalled, his eyes soft with the memory. "And I remember thinking that I wanted to know everything that made you light up like that. It wasn't just attraction, though there was definitely that too. It was this desire to really know you." That's when I knew I was in trouble. I shared my own journey, coming out in college, my previous relationships, the decision to be open about my sexuality at work. We compared notes on dating experiences, laughed about awkward moments, and gradually built a bridge between our different paths that had somehow led us to the same place. By the time we left the restaurant, walking close together through streets now darkened by night, there was a new comfort between us, the ease of shared secrets and mutual understanding. When he kissed me goodnight outside my apartment building, it felt both thrilling and somehow right, as if we'd been moving toward this moment all along without realizing it. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of discovery and discretion. At work, we maintained our professional relationship, though there were moments, a lingering glance across a meeting room, fingers brushing as we both reached for the same document, that threatened to give us away. After hours, we explored this new dimension of our relationship, learning each other's bodies with the same curiosity and attention we'd previously devoted to learning each other's minds. For Alex, each step was both a revelation and a reconciliation, coming to terms with desires he had either suppressed or simply never recognized. There were moments of doubt, of questioning, of wondering what this meant for his identity. I tried to be patient, to give him the space to figure things out without pressure or labels. "Maybe I'm bisexual," he said one night as we lay together in my bed, the city lights casting patterns on the ceiling above us. "Or maybe it's just you. Does it matter?" I turned to look at him, tracing the line of his profile with my eyes. "It only matters if it matters to you. Labels can be helpful, but they can also be limiting. What's important is how you feel, not what you call it." He nodded, pulling me closer. "Right now, I feel happy. Everything else is just details." But the details had a way of demanding attention, particularly in a workplace where relationships were both formed and scrutinized. About a month into our secret relationship, the inevitable happened. Someone noticed. It was Megan from HR, of all people, who approached me in the break room with a knowing smile. "So, you and Alex, huh?" she said, keeping her voice low despite the empty room. My heart rate immediately accelerated. "What about me and Alex?" She rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Come on, I saw you two outside that wine bar on 7th last weekend. You looked cozy." I felt a momentary panic, not because I was ashamed of our relationship, but because we hadn't yet discussed how to handle this exact situation. "We're friends," I said, the words sounding unconvincing even to my own ears. Megan's expression was kind but skeptical. "Friends don't usually look at each other the way he was looking at you. But don't worry, your secret's safe with me. Just be careful, okay? Office relationships can get complicated." I nodded, thanking her for her discretion while mentally preparing for the conversation I would need to have with Alex. When I told him about the encounter that evening, his initial reaction was concern. "Do you think she'll tell anyone?" he asked, pacing the small area of my living room. "She said she wouldn't, and I believe her. But Alex, people are going to figure it out eventually. We need to decide how we want to handle this." He stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair in that way I'd always found endearing. "I know. I'm still figuring things out, you know? I'm not ashamed of us, not at all. But I'm not sure I'm ready for the questions, the assumptions, the whole coming out experience at work." I understood his hesitation. Coming out is a deeply personal process, one that everyone navigates in their own time and way. "We can keep things quiet for as long as you need," I assured him. "But at some point, we'll need to decide if this is something we're serious about. Because if it is, hiding it indefinitely isn't going to work." The conversation prompted a period of reflection for both of us. What had started as an unexpected attraction had grown into something deeper, something that carried weight and consequence. We were no longer just exploring a connection. We were building a relationship that would require honesty, not just with each other, but with the world around us. 2 weeks later, at the company's quarterly happy hour, Alex made his decision. We had arrived separately and were maintaining our usual friendly but not too friendly dynamic when he approached me at the bar, a determination in his eyes that I recognized from our work projects but had never seen directed at our personal situation. "Can we talk?" he asked, nodding toward a quieter corner of the bar. I followed him, curious and slightly apprehensive. Once we were relatively secluded, he took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about what I want." My heart constricted, preparing for what might be coming. "And what's that?" His eyes met mine, steady and clear. "I want to stop hiding. I want to be able to hold your hand without checking who might be watching. I want to introduce you as my boyfriend, not my colleague. I want us, to be real in every part of my life." The words washed over me like a wave, relief and joy mingling in equal measure. "Are you sure? This is a big step." He nodded, reaching out to briefly touch my hand before remembering where we were. "I'm sure about you. The rest, I'll figure out as I go, but I don't want to pretend anymore." In that moment, I saw the courage it had taken for him to reach this decision, to embrace not just me, but a new understanding of himself, one that defied the categories and assumptions he had lived with his entire life. It was a gift, one I didn't take lightly. "So what now?" I asked, a smile starting to form despite my attempt to remain composed in our workplace setting. He glanced around the bar, at our colleagues laughing and chatting, oblivious to the momentous conversation happening in our corner. "Now, I'm going to get us both another drink. And then I'm going to stand a little too close to you and laugh a little too much at your jokes and not care who notices. And tomorrow, or next week, or whenever it comes up naturally, I'm going to stop correcting people who assume we're together. Because we are." True to his word, that night marked a shift in how we navigated our relationship at work. We didn't make a formal announcement. There was no mass email or standing on desks to declare our love, but we stopped hiding. We arrived together some mornings, ate lunch together more often, and let our natural affection for each other show in small, appropriate ways. The reactions varied. Some colleagues were surprised, others claimed they had suspected all along, and a few seemed genuinely confused by the revelation that Alex, who had only ever dated women before, was now in a relationship with a man. But overall, the response was supportive, or at the very least, respectful. For Alex, the process of being open about our relationship became part of a larger journey of self-discovery. He started using the term bisexual more comfortably, though he still sometimes said he was figuring things out, or simply in love with who I'm in love with. I watched as he navigated conversations with friends and family, some easier than others, but all part of embracing this new understanding of himself. 6 months after that night in the hallway, as we walked hand in hand through the same shortcut to the subway station, Alex stopped at almost the exact spot where he had first confessed his feelings. "Do you remember?" he asked, a playful smile on his lips. I nodded, unable to suppress my own smile. "How could I forget? You nearly gave me a heart attack." He laughed, pulling me closer. "Best risk I ever took." As he kissed me there, in the same spot where everything had changed, I marveled at the journey we had taken, from colleagues to friends to lovers to partners. It hadn't always been easy, navigating the complexities of workplace dynamics and personal discovery, but standing there in his arms, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth every moment of uncertainty. My straight coworker, as it turned out, wasn't so straight after all, and in discovering that truth about himself, he had helped me discover something too, that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful stories. Our story was still being written, each day adding new chapters of understanding, challenge, and love. But that moment against the hallway wall would always be where it truly began. The moment when honesty overcame fear, and two people found the courage to explore a connection that defied expectations and opened doors to a future neither of us had imagined possible. Total _char_count, 18,790.